Welcome to today's Proven Learning series. I am Christy Vergone, the VP of Operations here at Can-Am Systems and the Product Specialist for the Proven Jobs software. Today, we are going to be reviewing time and materials and covering our temporary labor and our drafts functionality in our time and materials feature item. Now, before we get started, I just want to review some general housekeeping items. All attendees have been muted to avoid any distractions, along with your cameras have also been turned off. Additionally, if you have any questions that arise during today's session, please submit those to our support team at support@canamsys.com. Now, before we begin today's Proven Learning series, I just want to review the agenda that we plan on going over today. The first thing we're going to take a look at is reviewing our time and materials setup. That is going to review the price list and the feature in general. Then we're going to do a walkthrough of a time and materials job from start to finish. Then review creating a draft and going through that billing wizard. Then finally review reporting. Now, at any given point, you can review a dedicated course in our Proven Academy that goes through the ins and outs of user role security and details on company settings. During today's Lunch and Learn, I'm not going to go into the details of user role securities, etc., because we don't have enough time to go through that on our agenda today, but I will go over the logistics of price list setup, etc., and how that is mapped all to your equipment, products, and internal and external labor. Now, please note that time and materials is a paid feature within our Proven Jobs software. Once that feature has been enabled by our support team, you will see a new tab within the Jobs section within Company Settings. Here, you will have various items that will need to be set up in order for time and materials to function properly. Now, the first thing you want to do is create your price list inside the system. Now here within the Time and Materials tab, I'm going to select Edit Time and Materials Price List. Now here I have options to create multiple price lists inside the system. So for example, if you have a dedicated price list for your property management companies that you've come to an agreement with, you have that opportunity to do so, or also create a main default price list. Or if you have specific price lists that you want to create dedicated to a specific job type, you can do so here in Company Settings. Once I have created my price list, or I continue to set up my price list, for example, I have several options to which I can create price list inside the system. It can be defined by a specific job type, or created by a specific region. Maybe you have a certain specific zip code coverage area that you want the price list to be dedicated to, or a specific customer, for example, a property management company that you have a deal with, that you have a specific price list that you want to create for that specific customer. Inside the system, however, each price list needs to have a common denominator, which we reference as a code. It doesn't matter what the charge is dedicated to each of these price lists, but the code needs to be a common denominator across each of the systems: labor, products, equipment, hotel, etc., so that the common denominator of the code is the same across all price lists that you have set in the system. Each of these codes, once uploaded, or price list structures, once uploaded into the system, will also be created within these edit material codes, or edit product codes, hotel codes, equipment codes, and labor codes, that if at any given point you needed to modify the specific code, it will update in the applicable price list. For example, my product codes, if I needed to modify the code for bag 3 to bag 3A, it will update the existing price list inside our system. The same for a labor code. If I needed to update admin to admin 1, I could do so within the edit labor code section, and it will update across the board. Inside our system, you must also match your items to your T&M code. So for example, if I have created specific price list inside my system on equipment, I must associate the air mover inside my price list to the applicable T&M code within my existing price list structure. So let's take a look at how that looks. So for example, if I come to settings, company settings, and I navigate to the job section and go to that time and materials tab and select edit time and materials price list, just going to open up that price list and go to my equipment section, and I'm going to search for air mover. I have WTR DRY. If I come into my equipment section and I look up an air mover in here, that same T&M code should be there. So every time I place an air mover at my job site location for a costing record, the charge record will be associated against the T&M code. This needs to be completed for all items inside the program: equipment, product and consumables, and trucks inside the system. So for example, the same is applicable in products. If I open up my wipes cotton cloth, I need to associate it to the T&M code that is in my price list structure. Again, those need to be the same across the board. The same with any warehouses and trucks. If I have trucks dump service sitting in the program, I need to associate that to a T&M code. The next item we want to take a look at is our internal labor and temporary labor within our time and materials feature item. When the time and materials feature item is applied to the database, users will notice custom fields that have been enabled in the system. If I navigate to settings and company settings, this time I'm going to be dedicated to the general section, and I'm going to select edit custom fields. And there are two sections we're going to be taking a look at today. In the drop-down menu option, I'm going to take a look at time clock here in the screen, and I'm going to select the time and materials subscreen. Now here you will notice there is existing items already in here that will automatically come with the database when the T&M feature is automatically applied. You do have the opportunity on the right-hand column to select required fields or not, add your own, or remove items that are automatically existing. You will notice we have things like vehicle code, hotel codes, small tools, per diem, PPE, etc. that are all applicable to the T&M feature and also show up on the backup reporting. In the other screen that is dedicated to temporary labor, if I select temporary labor screen, again, these items are automatically applied once the T&M feature is enabled on the screen. And you do have the ability to add custom fields if you would like to on the screen, or the ones that automatically come with the temporary labor feature. These items again show up on the time cards on clock in and clock out, and display on the mobile application and the web system, and the time cards screen. So for example, all these fields that are displaying here will display on the time card screen here. The other item that you will need to decide on how your company operates is within the time and materials tab is the default temporary labor label. This label will appear on the mobile application in the upper right-hand corner when you're clocking in to the job for temporary labor or external laborers only, and signed-in users are the only people that see that, and additionally will appear in the drop-down menu option here, or within settings and company settings on the edit custom fields section in the drop-down menu here. Now, how do you make this a T&M job? Well, inside the Time and Materials tab, within that section is an Edit Billing Method. This enables the tab to appear on your job file. you do need to select Apply Time and Materials and create a description for billing method. Now you can create other billing methods such as self-pay, insurance, etc., but enabling the edit billing method and creating or selecting the checkbox to apply time and materials is what enables the T&M tab to appear on your job file. So once that billing method has been chosen here inside the system, that time and materials tab will now appear on that job file. Let's talk about setting up your time and materials job prior to going on site. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create that new job inside of the Proven Jobs system. Let's create a mitigation job. Then we're going to add that billing method of time and materials and confirm that price list is applied. Now here I've created my new job, and of course I have that time and materials billing method applied at that job level, and that of course creates that time and materials tab inside my job file. Once that time materials tab has been enabled, I have other action items I can complete at the job level. The first one is defining default vendors. What does defining default vendors do for us? It allows that temporary labor team member to clock in and select a vendor company within the mobile application. This allows us to look at history inside the program. So for example, if I go to relationships and companies and select that specific temporary labor company, I can look at the temporary labor history dedicated to a specific date range or a specific person in the web system. I can also set up specific allocations inside the program by selecting the Allocations action button. Here I can define different insurance sections, flood, wind and hail, etc., or outside, inside, and those will appear on different sections of the program such as equipment, consumables, internal and external labor time cards, etc., for the user to select in the drop-down menu option when clocking in and out or transferring equipment or consumables to the job file. Then I want to confirm the pricing at the job level. So for example, if I had set up pricing dedicated to a specific zip code or property management company, specific job type, I need to confirm that that price list is applied correctly, or I need to select the appropriate one from the drop-down menu option here in the job level and apply it. I also can make any price adjustments or modifications at the job level that will not be reflective of the price list that we have set up in company settings. Now finally, let's take a look at running your job start to finish. On the mobile application with your signed in users such as a project manager, estimator, team lead, etc., they are going to select the temporary labor clock in item from the job on the mobile application. Once selected, it will bring you to the temporary labor clock in screen. Well, they will select the plus icon to create a new temp labor clock in. When it's chosen, they will enter in the name of the temporary labor or external labor, the vendor company, then select the labor code. Now, please remember the labor codes pull from the price list that have been set up in company settings. The price list is applicable from the job that was created. Now, again, if you created a job based off of a specific job type or zip code or customer that was set up in company settings, that will all be applicable to the labor code that pulls from that specific job type. Once the labor code search icon is selected, the specific labor codes will populate, allowing the signed in user to select the specific labor codes. Now again, those labor codes are associated to a charge that is sitting in company settings. That user can continue to select a vehicle, a hotel code, allocations, per diem, PPE, etc. inside the system. They can also then select their clock in time from the date time picker. Once all that information has been chosen, they can simply select Save. Of course, we do not want to select a timeout, break, or select a signature capture because that user is not done with their day at the job. Now here you will notice in the menu option that I have that user, Jane Doe, their labor code, their clock in time sitting on my temporary labor panel. I can also create a break for that particular user inside the program and have them clock out and complete their signature capture, which will in essence satisfy that particular temporary labor time card. You will see a green check mark indicating that it has been satisfied on the mobile application. Now we're going to complete an internal team member clock-in using the same functionality, except this time I'm going to use the clock-in icon to the left of temporary labor. And here the same items appear. I've selected allocations and then I've chosen my labor code. Now let's talk about equipment. If I needed to associate equipment at the job site location, such as air movers, dehumidifiers, etc., I can do so from the equipment screen, and there is a toggle here at the top that will toggle it on from materials to equipment. We also have equipment billing options available in the back end of company settings by going to settings and company settings and in equipment and inventory, and you can see the cost and charge basis and rounding rules set up to your company's options. Once I have selected my equipment from my equipment picker or scanning, however you decide as a company, once I select Save, that equipment is essentially placed on the job site. From a material or product standpoint, I can toggle it onto materials and I can continue adding materials if I select Add. It will also bring up a materials add screen, and I can select that search for products. It will populate my list of products that is sitting in the web system. And again, those products need to be associated to a T&M code for me to choose. And again, once I add my quantity, etc., and select Save, if I have a cost associated, it will job cost it. But again, more importantly, we want that to place a charge against that bill file. Any expenses that are sitting on the job, such as vouchers, etc., will also pull in as a cost record for us to review during our billing wizard or drafts section. Our internal team can also clock out of the program. You will see that they have their small tools, per diem, PRP, and a signature capture, just like our external team members. And again, that comes from that custom field screen that I showed you previously. All of this information, from time cards to products to equipment, etc., rolls up to the Proven Jobs web system. But more importantly, from an internal time card perspective, that is residing in our time cards section in Proven Jobs. And those do need to be processed or run through time card approval in order for those to post against that T&M job. Temporary labor time cards also pull into the web automatically and are displayed, but automatically sit there on the job file as a charge record as soon as they're processed. So those are the difference between the two. And again, all costs are going to sit there on that job for us to take a look at, and are also going to be sitting there ready for us to review on that bill file. Any equipment, subtrade records, any materials, consumables, etc. Now, we also have additional options inside of our temporary labor screen that I want to kind of talk about is our mass clock out, because on companies that utilize quite a bit of temporary laborers, you want to take a look at this. So in our mobile application, you will notice that I have a option to select all in my mobile application. So let's say I have 10 or 20 temporary laborers sitting here on my temp labor screen. I do have the ability to mass clock them all out. So here, once selected, it will select all of those temporary laborers. And then a timeout and unpaid break icon will automatically appear on my mobile application, which I could select it. Date time picker will automatically appear with the current time, which I could modify. And then I could go through and get the signature captures from each of those individual people. I also have the opportunity to duplicate previous day temp laborers. So if I'm using that same crew, I can also duplicate those time cards from the previous day. I can do this on the web or the mobile application. From a mobile perspective, I could just simply select this copy icon. And it'll ask me from what date to what date and what time and what job to what job, and also copy those custom fields such as the PRP, per diem, etc. onto that time card. So I'm not copying each one of those fields over. So for example, I'm just going to copy those dates, start time, that from and to jobs. I could take it even from another job if I needed to, and copy that information. So I'm duplicating all that information onto the mobile application, not having to recreate the wheel for 20 people, right? Now that we've captured our information, let's talk about billing out your job. So we have our vendor expenses, such as vouchers sitting at our job, labor, equipment, and material. We now need to invoice this job or create a draft prior to invoicing this job so we can see what is going to be our invoice. So we're going to select that billing icon sitting on the time and materials tab. And we're going to select create over here in the left corner. This will essentially create a draft. And what drafts do will allow you to preview the information or all expenses essentially sitting on the job file utilizing our billing wizard. Now inside the system, you do have the opportunity to include items that are existing in unbilled drafts. So when unchecked by default, only items not already in another person's drafts are included. So you could have 2 people working on this draft or 2 people working on drafts, and also will allow you to enter in a cutoff date, which essentially limits the draft to billing items with cost dates up to the selected date. So if you want to work on sections of a draft, you can do so. Once the draft is selected, you're going to just open it and it's going to display all the expenses tied to the job, whether that's a consumable, labor, internal labor, external labor, or vouchers associated to the job. Now, so let's take a look at how that looks. I'm going to just open up my job. I'm going to go to time and materials and I'm going to select billing, and then I'm going to select create. And I'm just going to select that checkbox and select save. And you will notice I have quite a bit of items displaying here inside my draft. Now, anything that has an exclamation associated to it means that it doesn't have a T&M code assigned to it. Here, I have the option to select that T&M code and select one from the dropped down list. Now, please keep in mind that it is not reflective of the item inside the actual product section. It will not update it. You will need to go and update that. It will only update this inside the actual draft that we are working on currently. I also have an option if I want to change the pricing or the quantity inside the individual line. It will allow me to do so. It will update it in red inside the system, so that it knows, or you know, that you have made a modification, and it will automatically check that inside the system to include it in the draft, because it's automatically assuming that you are tying this to the draft because you've made a modification on it. Now, you do have 2 options here. You can work with the current draft as it stands today and save and review, or you can utilize what we call a billing wizard. So what the billing wizard does, when chosen, it walks us through each section here as a categorization and lets you look at each one individually. So you will notice the one that's still in red is still existing where I changed it, and it still has that checkbox selection associated to it. So I can keep checking as I go along and keep selecting continue. This is just confirming we're using the correct price list. And it's going to walk me through each one individually. Now here, my internal labor is not selected, and I can update those accordingly inside this draft. And I can select these if I want to add them to my bill file. Select all if I want to. You can see this has a markup of PPE and small tools, which I've created in my price adjustments, my hotel, my equipment. Anything that has a $0 exclamation, it means it either was not on site long enough or it has no pricing associated to it. Now, once I click continue, this will allow me to bring up my totals for my bill file. Now here it's going to collapse everything and I can open it up to review. Once I select finalize invoice, it will automatically convert this over to an invoice and send this over to either Proven Jobs Web Accounting or QuickBooks, whichever one is applicable to your sync. Now, at any given point, you do have the ability to update any coding or allocations that I mentioned previously. So for example, if your allocation was not accurate or that team member forgot to enter it in, you do have that opportunity to fix that. Now, let's pretend that I did not want to bill this file. If I just exit Wizard, you will see I have two drafts sitting here at the present time. I can also take a look at the revisions. So you'll see I have two revisions, my initial one and then the next one. I can continue working on those revisions and I can compare the different revisions and see what has been modified or updated between the two. Now let's talk about reporting at the job level. Each day, companies have the opportunity to create a time and materials package report, or you can also create this at the end of the job. So if you navigate over here into the attachments section and into the reports section, this is where that time and materials package report resides. And it will automatically ask the user for a date and time selection. So here you can either choose the current date and time or the previous date and time if you're sending these updates to your adjuster daily. Then select Add. What this will do is create that time materials package report as an option to display. Then you have the opportunity to create a note inside the program. So for example, if I'm just going to back this up a couple of months and click Add, it will automatically create that time and materials package report. I can add a cover page note. So for example, I'm just going to put in a note here. And select Save. Here as a project manager, I have the option to review this detail. So I can see all the detail to sign off on that daily report. It will automatically pull in those team members, clock in and clock outs, their small tools, per diem if they used a vehicle, and their sign off sheets. And then once completed, I can sign off on that report by selecting Sign Now and selecting Save. I can send this over to my adjuster if needed. The other reporting that we have available is within the reporting section within the time and materials tab, and that allows the user to create that backup reporting that breaks down everything with consumables, equipment, internal and external labor. So if I navigate over here to the time and materials tab and I select reporting, that will apply once that invoice has been created to send over to your insurance company. And again, this allows you to select a specific invoice or drill down to a specific allocation if needed. That concludes today's Lunch and Learn on our time and materials feature item in Proven Jobs. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us at 1-866-992-2626, or please do not hesitate to email us at support@canamsys.com.